August 1944, Pacific Theater. Dear Helen, you asked me to describe the most impossible thing I've seen in this war. Here it is. A P-38 Lightning fighter engine built from parts of 6 different aircraft that were never designed to work together. P-40 pistons in a P-38 block. B-25 bomber bearings in a fighter crankshaft. C-47 transport fuel pump feeding a combat engine. Parts from 6 aircraft, 5 different manufacturers, 0 compatibility. Every engineer who saw it said the same thing. It shouldn't work. It can't work. Physics won't allow it. It worked, not just worked. It flew 30 combat missions. 30. That engine took an American pilot into combat 30 times and brought him home safely every single time. The mechanic who built it? Staff Sergeant Michael Torres, 26 years old, high school dropout from Texas, learned mechanics working on tractors and oil rigs. He's the smartest engineer I've ever met, and he never stepped foot in a university. That's America, Helen. That's what we do. We take impossible situations, limited resources, and pure necessity, and we create miracles. Let me tell you how he did it. I'm Captain James Mitchell, supply officer for the 475th Fighter Group, somewhere in the Pacific. I can't tell you exactly where, sensors and all, but it's a small island, former enemy territory, now ours. Airstrip, maintenance facilities, and about 200 American personnel keeping fighters in the air. My job is logistics, getting parts, fuel, ammunition, equipment to keep our aircraft operational. In theory, it's straightforward. In practice, it's impossible. Supply lines in the Pacific are fragile. Ships get delayed, aircraft get prioritized for other theaters. Parts get lost. And when you're on a small island 3,000 miles from the nearest major depot, wait for resupply can mean months. That's the situation we faced in July 1944. Lieutenant Robert Carter's P-38 Lightning took catastrophic engine damage during a mission. Anti-aircraft fire. One shell through the right engine. Destroyed the crankshaft, damaged cylinders, shattered multiple components. Total loss. Normally, remove destroyed engine. Install replacement engine. Aircraft back in service within a week. Except we didn't have a replacement engine, and I'd just received word that our supply ship had been diverted. Next shipment, 3 months minimum. I had to tell Carter, "You're grounded. 3 months. Sorry." Carter was frustrated but understood. "War doesn't run on convenience, Captain. I'll wait." Then Torres spoke up, Staff Sergeant Michael Torres. I'd known him for 6 months. Quiet guy, spoke only when he had something worth saying. Best mechanic in the unit, maybe best mechanic I'd ever seen. "Captain Mitchell, permission to attempt repair?" "Torres, the engine is destroyed. Not damaged, destroyed. There's nothing to repair." "Then permission to rebuild it." "Rebuild it with what parts? We don't have P-38 engine components." "We have 6 wrecked aircraft in the graveyard, sir. P-40S and B-25s, C-47s, others. Between them, I can source parts." I looked at him like he was crazy. "Those are different aircraft, different engines, different manufacturers. The parts won't be compatible. Not compatible as is, but I can modify them to fit." "Torres, you're talking about mixing parts from fighters, bombers, and transport aircraft. Different power ratings, different RPM ranges, different metallurgy. It won't work." "Sir, with respect, it will work if I make it work. Give me 3 weeks. If I can't rebuild this engine, Lieutenant Carter waits 3 months anyway. Nothing lost." I looked at Carter. He shrugged. "Captain, I trust Torres. If he says he can do it, I believe him." I approved it. Not because I thought it would work, because we had nothing to lose. I had no idea I was about to witness American innovation at its finest. Torres started in the aircraft graveyard the next morning. This graveyard was a section of the airfield where we kept wrecked aircraft, battle-damaged planes, crashed planes, aircraft cannibalized for parts, about 15 wrecks in various states of destruction. Torres spent 3 days just measuring. He had a micrometer, a caliper, and a notebook. Went from wreck to wreck, measuring components, taking notes, calculating tolerances. I checked on him day 2. Finding anything useful? Yes, sir. The P-40 Warhawk uses pistons that are only 0.03 of an inch different from P-38 specs. I can machine them to fit. 0.03 is within tolerance? If I do it right, yes, sir. What about the rest of the engine? He showed me his notebook, covered in calculations, measurements, compatibility charts he was creating from scratch. B-25 bomber bearings will fit the P-38 crankshaft if I modify the bearing journals. C-47 fuel pump can be adapted to P-38 specifications with custom fittings. P-39 valves are close enough to machine to exact specs. A 20 oil pump is actually superior to P-38 original. Better flow rate. Torres, you're talking about parts from 5 different aircraft. This engine is going to be a Frankenstein's monster. Yes, sir. But Frankenstein's monster was stronger than a regular human, wasn't he? I laughed. Couldn't help it. All right, Torres, show me what American ingenuity can do. For the next 3 weeks, I watched Torres work. Not constantly, I had other duties, but I checked on him daily, watched the process, witnessed something I'd never seen before. Torres didn't just swap parts, he engineered solutions. Take the pistons. P-40 pistons were close to P-38 specs, but not exact. 0.03 of an inch oversized. In an engine running at 3,000 RPM, 0.03 means friction, heat, eventual seizure. Torres spent 4 days machining those pistons, hand grinding them on a lathe, measuring constantly, adjusting, re-measuring. When he was done, those pistons were within 1,000th of an inch of perfect P-38 specification. I asked him, "How do you know this will work? Have you done this before?" "No, sir. First time." "Then, how do you know the tolerances?" "I understand how engines work, sir. Combustion, compression, heat expansion, friction coefficients. If you understand the principles, you can calculate the requirements." "Where'd you learn engine principles? Engineering school?" "No, sir. Oil rigs in Texas, tractors on farms, anything mechanical I could get my hands on, and library books when I wanted to understand the theory behind what I was doing." That's when I realized Torres wasn't just a mechanic, he was an engineer, self-taught, practical experience plus theoretical knowledge. The best kind of engineer, one who understood both how things work and why they work. The bearing problem was harder. B-25 bomber bearings were the right size but wrong specification, designed for lower RPM ranges. P-38 fighter engines run hotter and faster. Torres solved it through metallurgy. He heat-treated the bearings, modified their hardness properties, made bomber bearings capable of handling fighter engine stress. I watched him heat the bearings in a makeshift forge, just a steel barrel, charcoal, and a hand-cranked blower. Temperature control by eye. How do you know when it's the right temperature? Color, sir. Steel changes color at specific temperatures. Cherry red is approximately 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. That's what I need for this bearing treatment. You're doing heat treatment by eye, without temperature gauges? Blacksmiths did it for thousands of years, sir. If you know what to look for, it's reliable. He was right. Post-treatment testing showed those bearings met fighter engine specifications, not close, exact. The fuel pump adaptation was elegant. C-47 transport fuel pumps delivered different pressure and volume than fighter engines need. Torres couldn't change the pump's internal mechanics, so he engineered external restrictions, custom fabricated brass fittings, precision-drilled orifices that restricted flow to exact fighter engine requirements. turned a transport pump into a fighter pump through pure fluid dynamics understanding. Where'd you learn fluid dynamics? Worked oil derricks, sir. Fluid flow is fluid flow, whether it's oil, water, or aviation fuel. Pressure, volume, restriction, same mathematics. The valve modification required the most precision. P39 valves were close, but not perfect. Wrong angle on the valve face, wrong stem diameter, wrong spring tension. Torres reground the valve faces, machined the stems, fabricated custom springs from salvaged steel. When he finished, those valves were indistinguishable from factory P38 valves in performance. Every component was like this. Torres taking incompatible parts and making them compatible through understanding, calculation, and hand fabrication. Week 3, Torres assembled the engine. I watched the whole process. Took 2 days. Every component placed with precision, every bolt torqued to exact specification, every clearance measured and verified. When he finished, the engine looked wrong. You could see it wasn't original. Different components, different finishes. Some parts polished aluminum, others painted steel. A patchwork engine. But Torres had confidence. "It'll run, sir." "You sure?" "Yes, sir. I've calculated every tolerance, every clearance, every specification. This engine will run." We mounted it on the test stand. Torres did final checks. Fuel lines, oil lines, electrical connections, control linkages. Everything hooked up. Lieutenant Carter was there. Half the maintenance crew was there. Everyone wanted to see if Frankenstein would live. Torres primed the engine, set the mixture, called "Clear prop," hit the starter. The engine coughed, sputtered, caught, and ran, smooth, steady, beautiful. Torres let it warm up, then advanced throttle. Engine responded perfectly. Ran through the full power range. No vibration, no rough running, no problems. We ran it for 30 minutes. Full diagnostics. Oil pressure, perfect. Cylinder head temperatures, perfect. RPM response, perfect. Compression, perfect. The engine that shouldn't have existed was performing like a factory-fresh power plant. Torres's expression didn't change. No smile, no celebration. Just quiet satisfaction. "It works because the mathematics said it would work." I was stunned. "Torres, you built an engine from 6 different aircraft using hand tools and a lathe. This is... I don't even know what to call this." Carter spoke up. "I call it genius. Torres, if you're willing to sign off on this engine, I'm willing to fly it." "I'm signing off, sir. This engine is airworthy." We installed the engine on Carter's P38, ran ground tests, taxi tests, everything perfect. Carter took it up for a test flight. 20 minutes, full power tests, aerobatics, pushed the engine hard, landed, and reported. "Run smoother than my original engine did. No vibration, perfect power delivery. I'm calling this aircraft Frankenstein, because Torres built something that shouldn't be alive, but is." The name stuck. Over the next 6 months, Frankenstein flew 30 combat missions, escort missions, ground attack missions, long-range patrols, every mission demanding full engine performance, 0 mechanical failures, not one. The engine Torres built from impossible parts was more reliable than factory engines, more reliable than engines built by trained engineers with proper facilities and correct parts. Why? Because Torres understood every component intimately. He'd hand-built each one, knew its strengths and limitations, knew exactly how it would perform. Factory engines are built by assembly line workers following procedures. Torres's engine was built by an engineer who understood every principle involved. That's the difference between following instructions and understanding systems. Word spread. Other units heard about Frankenstein. Wanted to know how Torres did it. Could the technique be replicated? Torres spent his off-duty time teaching other mechanics, shared his measurements, explained his calculations, showed them how to evaluate parts from different aircraft for compatibility. It's not magic, he'd say. It's just understanding how engines work, understanding metallurgy, tolerances, thermodynamics, fluid dynamics. Once you understand the principles, you can make anything work. Some mechanics got it, started successfully adapting parts, creating hybrid solutions when supply lines failed. Others didn't. They could follow Torres's specific instructions, replicate what he'd done, but couldn't innovate on their own, couldn't see solutions Torres saw. That's when I realized Torres wasn't just skilled. He was gifted. He saw mechanical problems as puzzles with multiple solutions. Where others saw incompatibility, Torres saw opportunities for creative adaptation. I wrote a report about Frankenstein, sent it up the chain. Thought maybe somebody would recognize Torres's contribution, give him a medal or commendation or something. What I got back surprised me. A visit from a full colonel, engineering officer from 5th Air Force Headquarters. Colonel examined Frankenstein's engine personally, interviewed Torres, reviewed all his calculations and modifications. Then, he said something I'll never forget. Sergeant Torres, I have a degree in mechanical engineering from MIT. I've worked as an aircraft engineer for 15 years. I would not have attempted what you did. I would have said it was impossible. You proved that practical knowledge combined with theoretical understanding can exceed formal engineering training. Torres just nodded. Thank you, sir. How did you learn all this? Where did you study? Oil rigs, sir. Farms. Anywhere with machinery that needed fixing. And libraries. Read every mechanical engineering book I could find. You taught yourself? Yes, sir. America has good libraries. Free education if you're willing to read. The colonel smiled. Sergeant, after the war, if you're interested, I can arrange admission to MIT's engineering program. Full scholarship. What you've demonstrated here is exactly what American engineering needs. People who can innovate, not just calculate. Torres considered it. I'll think about it, sir. But honestly, I like working with my hands, like fixing things. Not sure I want to sit in classrooms. The offer stands. America needs engineers like you, whether you're in a classroom or a maintenance hangar. Helen, I'm writing this because you need to understand what I witnessed. This wasn't just a mechanic fixing an engine. This was American ingenuity at its purest form. Torres had no university degree, no formal engineering training, no proper facilities, no correct parts. What he had, American public education that taught him to read and learn, American libraries that gave him access to knowledge, American values that taught him impossible is just a challenge to overcome. And he created something that trained engineers said couldn't exist. That's what makes America exceptional. Not our resources, not our factories, our people, Americans who refuse to accept, can't, who see problems as opportunities, who innovate when others would quit. Torres is a high school dropout from Texas who became a better engineer than MIT graduates. Not because he's superhuman, because America gave him the tools to educate himself and the freedom to apply that education creatively. That's the country we're fighting for. A country where a kid from an oil rig can out-engineer someone with fancy degrees. Where practical knowledge is valued as much as theoretical training. Where innovation comes from necessity and determination, not just laboratories and universities. Frankenstein is still flying. 30 missions and counting. Lieutenant Carter says he'll never fly another aircraft. This one was built by a genius. Why would I trust a factory when I can trust Torres? Torres just shrugs. It's not genius. It's just understanding how things work and being willing to make them work differently. That's humility talking. What Torres did was genius. Pure, practical, American genius. The kind that wins wars, the kind that builds nations, the kind that takes impossible situations and creates solutions nobody thought possible. I'm scheduled to rotate home in 3 months. When I get back, I'm going to tell everyone I meet about Torres, about Frankenstein, about what American mechanics can accomplish when resources are limited and innovation is required. Because this story needs to be told, needs to be remembered. After the war, factories will build millions of engines, engineers will design new aircraft, technology will advance. But nobody will ever build an engine quite like Frankenstein. Nobody will ever take parts from 6 different aircraft and create something that shouldn't work, but works perfectly. That was possible only because of Staff Sergeant Michael Torres. Only because of his unique combination of practical experience, theoretical knowledge, creative thinking, and absolute refusal to accept limitations. Only because he's American. Raised in a country that gave him libraries to learn from, gave him opportunities to work and experiment, gave him the freedom to try impossible things. Helen, when this war ends, and it will end, we're going to win. I want you to remember this story. Remember that America's strength isn't just our military, isn't just our industry. It's our people. People like Torres, who come from nothing, who educate themselves, who solve impossible problems with creativity and determination. That's who we are. That's what we do. We build Frankensteins. We make impossible possible. We turn necessity into innovation. And we do it quietly. No fanfare, no recognition. Just competent Americans doing competent work under impossible circumstances. Torres didn't build that engine for glory. He built it because Lieutenant Carter needed to fly, because American forces needed every fighter operational, because the mission mattered more than the difficulty. That's American values. That's American character. That's why we're going to win this war, and why America will continue leading the world afterward. Not because we're perfect, because we're practical, because we innovate, because we refuse to let obstacles stop us. I'll write again soon. Next time, hopefully with news that we're closer to coming home. Until then, know that American ingenuity is alive and well in the Pacific. Know that American mechanics are performing miracles daily. Know that we're winning not just with firepower, but with brain power. And know that somewhere on a Pacific island, a P-38 Lightning named Frankenstein is flying combat missions powered by an engine that every engineer said couldn't work. It works because an American mechanic understood that can't just means nobody has figured out how yet. Torres figured out how, and in doing so, he proved what America is really about. Not giving up, not accepting limits, not waiting for perfect conditions, just understanding the problem, creating a solution, and making it work. That's American engineering. That's American determination. That's American genius. Stay safe, Helen. This war will end, and when it does, I'm bringing stories like this home. Stories about Americans like Torres who changed what's possible. Your friend, Captain James Mitchell, Supply Officer, 475th Fighter Group, United States Army Air Force Pacific Theater, PS. Torres asked me to stop calling him a genius. Captain, I'm just a mechanic who reads books. Any American could do what I did if they learned the principles. I told him, Torres, most Americans with engineering degrees couldn't do what you did, except the compliment. He just smiled and went back to work. That's Torres. Genius who doesn't think he's special. That's the most American thing about him. Subscribe for more untold stories where American ingenuity turned impossible into routine, where education, whether formal or self-taught, created capabilities that exceeded expert expectations, where practical knowledge combined with theoretical understanding produced miracles that textbooks said couldn't exist. This is American innovation at its finest. Not in laboratories with unlimited resources, but in the field with limited tools and unlimited determination.